Hi, my name is Rebecca. I am a Borzoi breeder breeding under the kennel name of Envious, and I've recently been seeing a lot of arguments on Facebook forums and the internet regarding the use of the degenerative myelopathy or DM test results for the ethical breeding of Borzoi. There are a lot of people who are saying, oh my gosh, we cannot breed a carrier to a clear. This is unethical to be using carriers. I've actually seen this so many times, to be honest. It's become pretty apparent to me that there are a lot of people who are a little confused on what the results mean and how to ethically breed using these test results. And I've decided instead of just continually posting on these discussions explaining, why carriers are okay to use, I've just decided that it would be a good idea to make a video making this concept as simple as possible. So full disclosure here, I am not a veterinarian, but I am a human clinical laboratory scientist. I have both my bachelor's degree and master's, and I'm currently full-time in collegiate academia. So this is actually literally what I do for a living. I teach genetics to college students, as well as many other topics. So I figured I would try to break this down for people so that they have better tools in their toolbox on DM testing. For the people who are knowledgeable about this, so please know that I'm going to refrain from using terms like allele and autosomal recessive and locus and all that science jargon. Again, the whole point of this is to attempt to make it as simple as possible. So what is degenerative myelopathy or DM in the first place? So this is an inherited neurological disorder that occurs not only in Borzoi but also in other breeds. This disorder is characterized by dogs developing gradual muscle wasting, usually starting in the hind limbs. This disorder unfortunately progresses until the dog is unable to walk. At the time of this presentation, a genetic DM test is required for Borzoi to obtain their CHIC number with the OFA. Now, the dog pictured here is a Borzoi that was genetically determined to be at risk for degenerative myelopathy, and unfortunately, he did develop it. So as you can see, he had to use the assistance of a wheelchair in order to walk around. So the DM test is performed using a cheek swab, and that cheek swab is then sent out and results will be given. So each Borzoi will have one of three possible results, and the first possible result is N/N, and this is commonly referred to as DM clear. So where are these N's even coming from? So N stands for normal. So one of these N's is coming from one parent of the tested dog, and the other N is coming from the other parent of the tested dog. Borzoi who are N/N or clear will not get DM and will not transmit any copies of DM to any of their offspring. Now the second possible result is N/DM. This is commonly referred to as DM carrier. So one N, or one normal, is coming from one of the tested dog's parents, and one copy of DM is coming from the other parent of the tested dog. Borzoi who have this test result will not develop DM, but they do have the possibility of transmitting one DM copy to any of their offspring. Now the last possible result is DM/DM. This is also called DM at risk. This is where the tested dog has two copies of DM, so one from each of its parents. So the father of this tested dog gave him a DM copy, and the mother of this tested dog gave them also another DM copy. So a dog with this test result is considered at risk of developing degenerative myelopathy, and it has a 100% chance of transmitting one DM copy to their offspring. So what do these DM test results mean for selecting breeding partners? To determine what we as breeders should breed versus not breed in regards to degenerative myelopathy, of course, the knowledge of genetic probability using something called a Punnett square is critical. And I'm going to show you, of course, how to do this, but first let's assign these DM test types to some dogs. So this first dog here is going to be our N/N dog, or representing our clear dog. The second dog is going to represent an N/DM, or also called a DM carrier dog. And the last dog is going to represent a dog that is DM/DM, which is considered at risk. So I mentioned on the last slide something called a Punnett square. This is a grid often made up of 4 boxes that is utilized all the time in genetics to help predict what the offspring will inherit when breeding 2 potential mates. This Punnett square will show us all the genetic possibilities from a breeding, and in this case, it will show us all the genetic possibilities for DM inheritance. So I'm going to show you how to use this Punnett square for DM testing. And the first example is going to be using our clear dogs. So breeding a clear to a clear. So the sire here is a clear. Remember, this dog has 2 copies of N. And the dam is also a clear, having 2 copies of N. So using this Punnett square will show us all the possibilities that we could get when breeding a DM clear borzoi to another DM clear borzoi. So the sire is N/N, all right? And he is going to give each of his puppies either an N, so we're going to put that N on this part of the grid, or another N, so we will put this N on this part of the grid. Now the dam is also N/N, so the same thing applies here. She's going to give each of her puppies either one N, which we'll write over here on this part of the grid, or another N, so we'll put this N on this part of the grid. So both parents can only contribute one N to each of their puppies because they only have N's, right? So what does this N and N make here? So what I'm talking about, I'm saying here and here combines to make here, all right? And let's see, here and here combines to make this number. And here and here combines to make this genetic possibility, and here combines to make this genetic possibility. Okay, so that's the only time I'm going to show you, but I'll give you the results, obviously. So what does this first N and N make? N and N. And this N, this bottom one here on the left-hand side, combined with this N gives you N, N, right? And this is the same for all of the boxes in this grid, N and N, right? So each parent only has N's to give. So that means that 100% of all the offspring in a clear to a clear breeding will be N/N, which will also be clear. So this is how you use a Punnett square. I'm going to go through all the different possibilities to kind of give you an idea of the breedings that will result. So let's use this exact same principle, but this time let's theoretically breed a DM at-risk borzoi to another DM at-risk borzoi. So the sire here is at risk, having 2 copies of DM, and the dam is also at risk, having 2 copies of DM. So using this Punnett square will show us all the possibilities we could get when breeding a DM at-risk borzoi to another DM at-risk borzoi. So the sire is DM/DM, and he's going to give each of these puppies either a DM. So a DM, so we're going to put this DM on this part of the grid, or he can also give another DM. So we'll put this DM on this part of the grid. Now the dam is also DM/DM, so the same thing applies here. She is going to give each of her puppies either one DM, which we'll write over here on this part of the grid, or another DM. All right, so we'll put this DM on this part of the grid. So both parents can only contribute one DM to each of their puppies because they only have DMs to give, right? So what does this DM and DM make? So this first box here, DM and DM, right? And this DM combined with the other DM gives you DM/DM. And that is the same for all of these boxes in the grid, all right? So what does this mean? So this means that every single puppy that comes from a DM at-risk parent that is bred to a DM at-risk parent will also be DM at-risk. All right, now let's theoretically breed a DM carrier borzoi to another DM carrier borzoi. So recall what copies DM carriers have. They have one N and one DM copy. So the sire here, all right, is the carrier having one N and one DM. And the dam is also a carrier having one copy of N and one copy of DM. So using this Punnett square will show us all the possibilities we could get when breeding a DM carrier borzoi to another DM carrier borzoi. So this sire is N/DM, and he is going to have, he's going to be able to give each of his puppies either an N, so we're going to put the N over on this part of the grid. All right, now here's where it's different from the other ones that we've been doing. So he has one copy of N and he has one copy of DM, all right? So the DM, he could also give a DM in addition to this N. So either an N or a DM. So we'll put the DM on this side of the grid, okay? Hopefully this makes sense, all right? Now, the dam is also N/DM, so the same thing applies here. So she's going to give either of her puppies either one N, which we'll put over here on this part of the grid, or one DM copy. So we'll put this on this part of the grid. So let's do this Punnett square with these theoretical parents. So in the first box, so we have an N from the sire. So let's do it here. We have an N here from the sire and an N from the dam. And let's just write all these. So here's a DM and an N. Actually, let's make this one red here. So that way it makes sense. Let's use green. So N, DM, that's going to give this result. And let's use purple. So this one and this one is combining to make this. Okay, so in this first box here, all right, we have N and an N. What does that make? N/N, all right, good. What about in this next box below it? DM and an N. That's going to give you N and a DM. Good. So what about the next box on the right-hand side on the top? It's an N and a DM again, right? Yep. So N and DM. Then the very last box, there's a DM from the sire and a DM from the dam, right? And that's going to give us DM, DM. Okay. So probability-wise, breeding a carrier to a carrier, the puppies that are resulting from this parent breeding, all right, will have a 25% chance of being N/N, which is clear, a 50% of being an N/DM, which is a carrier, and of course each of the puppies will have a 25% chance of being DM/DM, which is considered at risk. Okay, so let's keep going. So let's say you wanted to breed a DM carrier to a DM at risk. So the sire will be our carrier Borzoi for this example. And remember, he has one copy of N and one copy of DM. And our dam will be our at-risk example. And remember, this black and tan is the at-risk. And this black and tan, or this DM at risk, has two copies of DM. So the sire is N/DM. All right, so he will either give each individual puppy an N copy, so we'll write that N on this part of the grid, or he can give each individual puppy a DM copy, which we'll write on this part of the grid. Now the dam is at risk, so she has two copies of DM, so she will automatically give every puppy she produces a DM copy. So we'll write each of these on these parts of the grid. All right. So the first box in this grid gets an N from dad and a DM from mom. So let's just keep writing it. Why not? N and a DM. That's going to give this result here. Then we're going to have this copy from dad and this copy from mom, which will give us this result. And then we have this and this to give this result. And let's use purple again, this and this to give this result. All right, okay, so let's do this together. All right, so that first grid, that first box in this grid is going to get an N copy from dad and a DM copy from mom. So what does that produce? That's an N/DM. Right below it, it's going to be a DM copy from dad and a DM copy from mom. So that's going to be a DM/DM. And the next one to the right up on top, an N copy and a DM copy. So an N copy from dad and a DM copy from mom, you're going to have N/DM. And then the last one is going to be a DM copy from dad and a DM copy from mom, and that's going to give us DM/DM. All right. So from an at-risk bred to a carrier Borzoi, okay, 50%. So each puppy has a 50% chance of being an N/DM, which is a carrier, and each puppy has a 50% chance of being a DM/DM, which is considered at risk. And these percentages are coming from this chart, right? So this one is a carrier, and this one is a carrier, and this one is at risk, and this one is at risk. So you can see two of them are carriers and two of them are DM at risk. So it's 50%, right? That's how I'm getting the calculation. Okay, so what about breeding a DM clear Borzoi to a DM at risk Borzoi? So do you think that this will have a chance at producing a DM at risk Borzoi? Think about that for a second. If we took a DM clear Borzoi to a DM at-risk borzoi, would any of the offspring have a DM at-risk status? If you answered yes, you're actually incorrect. And I think fundamentally this is where people are confused. So let's use this sire, the sire, as our clear example. So 2 copies of N, all right? And our dam will be our at-risk example. So she's going to have 2 copies of DM. So the sire is N/N. So again, remember, we should know this by now. He can only give N, right? So we'll put both of these N's on this part of the grid. Excuse me. So the dam is at risk. So she has 2 copies of DM, okay? And she can only give DM copies to her offspring. So we'll put DM on this side, these sides of the grid, all right? So every single one of these puppies will have 1 copy of N and 1 copy of DM, which means that they are all carriers. Look, right? They're all carriers. And these carriers are not affected by DM at all. None of these puppies are at risk for developing DM. They are just carriers. So some people in the breed will say, well, I don't want carriers. I'll be honest here. I'm not the Borzoi breeding police, okay? But people can do what they want. But I do think that people need to make informed decisions and actually know genetically what they are saying. What is the issue with producing a carrier? It's only going to be an issue if you breed it to the wrong dog, the wrong DM test dog. If you make informed breeding decisions based on DM testing, a carrier has a good chance of producing DM clear puppies. So let's look at an example of this on the next slide. All right, so let's breed a DM clear Borzoi to a DM carrier Borzoi. The sire in this example will be our clear. So 2 copies of N, and the dam in this example will be our carrier. So 1 copy of N and 1 copy of DM. So the sire is N/N, so he can only give N copies to his offspring, and we'll put both of these N's on this part of the Punnett square grid. The dam is N/DM, so she can put either give a N copy or a DM copy. So let's mark those on the grid. So an N and the DM. So what does this produce? So half of these are N/N and half are N/DM, right? So I guess let's just do this again. N and N is going to produce this. N and N will produce this. N and DM. Okay, now let's fill these in. All right, so that one will be N/N, the next one will be N/DM, and the last one will be N/DM, all right? So what does this produce, right? It produces a great chance of clears and carriers. So each puppy from a clear to a carrier breeding will have a 50% chance of being clear. Also, each puppy will have a 50% chance of being a carrier, all right? So let's sum this up. If you breed a clear to a clear, it will result in 100% clear. If you breed an at-risk to an at-risk, 100% of those puppies will also be at risk. If you breed a carrier to a carrier, each puppy will have a 25% chance of being clear, a 25% chance of being at risk, and a 50% chance of being carriers. If you breed a carrier to an at-risk dog, each puppy has a 50% chance of being at risk and a 50% chance of being a carrier. If a clear is bred to an at-risk, 100% of the puppies will be carriers. And if a clear is bred to a carrier, each puppy has a 50% chance of being clear and a 50% chance of being a carrier. So these are not opinions. So these are scientific facts, okay? This is not just Borzoi people doing this stuff. This is like the entire world in genetics, all right? So these are facts, factual things. However, this next thing I will say is my own opinion, okay? So as a Borzoi breeder, I'm not willing to produce a DM at-risk animal. I just feel internally that I owe it to my breeding program and my puppy buyers not to produce at-risk dogs. So that means I would not breed an at-risk to an at-risk, or a carrier to a carrier, or a carrier to an at-risk. Now, we can and we should utilize breeding DM carriers. We can do this by breeding them to a DM clear dog. I just showed you how that is genetically possible. So Borzoi, our breed pool is too small and will continue to get smaller. And by eliminating DM carriers from our breeding program, it's going to further hinder and harm our breed. So use DM carriers. Just breed them to DM clears. It's not difficult, and hopefully this helps you.